Okay. My first question for you, we've already gone over what you're trying to accomplish, but my next question would be, what is your definition, personally, of nonpartisan? What does that mean to you and your blog?
Nonpartisan is simply recognizing that politics, like most social life, family life, business, whatever, social interactions are not zero-sum. Just because someone wins doesn't mean someone else must lose. Mm-hmm. Most social interactions of all kinds, you can have many winners, if not most people involved considering themselves a winner. It depends on how you deal with it. It's when people insist that if you are not the winner, you're a loser. Which means that everybody else must be a loser so they can feel like they're a winner. All that produces is divisiveness. That's partisanship.
Okay.
My party over everybody else. It's a form of collective identity that defeats the whole purpose of, Western individualistic republic,
okay,
mass effort.
Corollary question is that in Russia they have so many established political parties that it divides the vote, almost to the point of it being completely pointless for there to be so many different parties.
Yes, it's intentional.
Yeah. Do you think the solution would be to establish a different sort of democracy where there are different parties, or do you think that it just needs to be more clearly defined that you don't need to establish yourself to a party?
I think more clearly defined that the parties themselves are kind of a misconception. The idea that people can work together in common causes is great. The idea that the leadership of such organizations then are sort of own the loyalty of their followers, mm-hmm. and can direct it where they want it to go, instead of having to constantly refresh their message from the people.
Okay.
That's why, to follow up, that's why I think that with unions, I have no problem with unions. They're a wonderful concept, but once they negotiate a contract and the contract is signed, the union should disband until a new dispute. That the employees, who are the purpose of the union, their well-being, decide we need representation again. They form a new collective bargaining unit. They bargain, they settle, and it disbands. The leadership has become a means unto itself.
Okay. So the next couple of questions are going to go into the definitions, because that seems to be the whole problem here, is mm-hmm. the misconception in the American
definitions, public. It's the misuse of words that have allowed these forces to fool the people.
Because there's so many different synonyms that they're hot words that people will use, I want to go a little bit into your perspective on the actual terms. We'll start with, what, in your opinion, is the difference between what most people would call themselves as a moderate, the general view of what a moderate is in the public, and nonpartisan? Or independent and moderate or nonpartisan? People
don't even know what to call themselves. They call themselves what the partisans tell them to call themselves. That's part of the problem. Well, there's a lot of these terms that are basically, again, used to divide people into smaller and smaller units. I'm independent. I'm a libertarian. I'm, nonpartisan. I'm moderate. And a lot of them, it adds up to, I'm not involved. I don't care enough to get on board with either side. Or I don't care. The whole system is so corrupt, I don't feel that I can make a difference. So I'm just going to vote each issue and pray that maybe things will work out.
So
they have no focus. They have no center.
In essence, your Heretics Crusade blog and your approach to nonpartisanship is really for the sake of actual effective problem solving in terms of political issues, is to start initially with the maybe clarifying or disbanding of what these parties are, because it seems to be a back and forth sort of thing.
Not so much disbanding or anything. I think the party, it should be a shame to be associated with one of these groups. A national politician who needed, in the America I envision, a politician who took any influence from a business or any major organization and used that to say, because I have these people behind, this one group of people behind me, I can bully everyone else on other issues. No, it's like, if you cannot say on the issues, on my actions, on my abilities, I have shown that I can serve the American public as a whole, what's the point of being there to begin with?
A good example,
it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, if you're an idiot, but we were Everybody, they elect idiot Republicans, idiot Democrats because it's a Democrat, because it's a Republican.
It's like the idea of ear notes in a bill that's passing, how they will tie into it many different legislations onto something and get behind it simply because the first issue is
because none of them can argue, none of them can agree on good ideas.
Right. So
to them, there are no good ideas. There's only ideas that serve their constituency and ideas that don't.
Okay, so in your experience, as far as notable figures, and this can go like either historical or contemporary, or either just speakers or actual leaders. But what examples of notable figures from any nation could you list a few examples that you actually relate to and best reflect your own perspective as a genuine moderate or nonpartisan?
Winston Churchill.
Okay.
He saw issues to be solved. He saw very early on that despite people's tastes, things were going to go a certain way with Germany and with Hitler.
Lincoln would be a
Lincoln, that's another very good example. I was just reading a very good textbook on that period. And he had some very complicated choices. People, again, that's a great example where the partisans try to make it black or white.
He was for the war.
Slavery. It's like he was either for the anti-slave. He was either an abolitionist or he was an asshole.
Seems to be the best interest of the public.
And no, he was for the best interest of the country. He was of the mind that slavery had to go, but he recognized that it was so intermingled with so many different aspects of the culture, especially in the South, that it couldn't be something done by a wave of fiat from above.
Do you think that?
And the problem is the character of the South had refused that evolution, while the North took the path, and that resulted in a huge split in character in the country at the time.
You're going to have to forgive me if my references are off because my history isn't exactly good, but what do you think about Roosevelt during Pearl Harbor? It was a similar approach but with an opposite tact.
You mean leading with their chin with Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, let Pearl Harbor happen even though they had time to stop it because that was what the American public unfortunately...
It's more than just not having time to stop it. They egged it on. That was an intentional result of the policy of pushing Japan. We stepped on their toes until they finally swung at us.
But do you think that he's a good example of someone who is basically not doing what's best for the American public, but in order to wake them up, to get them to involve themselves in the war?
No, I'd say he tried to a great extent to do a lot of moderate things, but in essence he was still a leftist. He was still very much for a certain mindset that was not following the basic constitution and getting on with what we, that. It was, no, we got to remove all of this part of the structure, and we're going to do the New Deal was just that, a New Deal.
Okay, the next three questions sort of relate to giving examples that the public could relate to, and as far as your perspective goes, as what you see as the detriment, the opposite side of that. So the first question would be, if you could point out one singular act or political angle currently going on, or a person that is responsible as being if you could name a political stance from either party as example of being the most detrimental to the American society as far as the perspective goes, maybe not the actual issue.
Campaign financing. It's completely across the board. Doesn't matter whether you even have a party. If you're taking, it comes back to a Supreme Court decision recently, just a few years back, where they decided that a pile of dollars equals people's voices. So one person who happens to have a vault full of money can purchase a voice thousands of times louder than Joe Blow, his neighbor, who happens to be poor. And I think that was one of the worst decisions since Dred Scott, because it destroys the concept of individual free speech meaning anything. Now it's only the people who have the money, regardless of how they got it, what they want it to be done with, have the influence in politics.
That's a great example, I think, but do you think that if maybe a singular issue is going on, say the abortion issue or the...
Those are just distractions. There's stupidity on both sides in that.
But anything that's going on currently that is actually coming up to vote, do you think that there's any singular political act or political stance that is not an example of it in and of itself being wrong, but exemplifies what you see as this ridiculous emphasis on partisanship that distracts from the issue?
The borders.
Borders?
Neither side has bothered to do the one thing they keep screaming to the other side about doing when the other side is in power.
Right.
Secure them. Do something. Do something that means something with it. I mean, when Bush was in power, I mean, quite frankly, he was a moron. He tried to sell port security to Dubai. I mean,
do you think that...
But as soon as the left got in power, what did they do?
As far
Nothing.
as clarifying to the public and the readership, as far as what... Unfortunately, you're right. I believe that we do have a lot of emphasis on if you have a campaign or perspective, it must have a sway and an agenda. Do you think
because somebody's paying for it, and if you don't ultimately pay back who's paying for it, that's why I think all campaign financing must be eliminated.
Exactly.
If nobody can get any money from any private party for a campaign, every candidate is equal.
But in terms of, to clarify to your readership, it would seem to me here from what you've been saying that you don't have a specific agenda per se.
No, that's why I don't comment on elections other than some commentary on the presidential election, more on the process and the individual candidates. But I do not comment on direct politics because it's all just a manifestation. It's just a game. It's an illusion.
Just to clarify that your personal concern here and the whole reason behind the Heritage Crusade blog is not necessarily pertaining to the issues in themselves, the outcome of itself, although I'm sure you have concerns, but you are out an advocate basically to a more constructive political process.
Exactly.
So, okay, just to clarify.
I've run back into heritage of Robert Heinlein, Mark Twain, Paine, Jefferson, Burke, Locke. The idea that the rational liberal mind can actually figure out enough of what's going on to make rational, compassionate, human decisions that will bit by bit improve everybody's lot. And I think history has proved that it does work, and that the friction comes from the people on the extremes who won't let anything be solved because they can't be responsible for being right.
Regrettably, that does seem to be, like I said, it seems to be a main concern, and possibly within readership there may be some confusion as to your blog because people automatically assume that if you have a political pundit or you have a perspective that it has to be pertaining to a campaign or a party
agenda.
and their agenda.
Right.
So I can understand how a genuine definition of a moderate would be some issues, but here we're
That's my biggest battle, is getting people to actually discuss the idea. Everybody I talk to tends to react. If they don't agree with me, if I'm not saying things that they're used to hearing, they automatically assign me a position on the far side of middle for the opposition.
So what you're saying,
and I have to talk myself to neutrality. Every time I do, I find that general public agrees almost across the board.
Right, so basically
they're hypnotized.
What you're saying is that before we can even discuss the problems in and of themselves, we need to discuss the way in which we're approaching solving the problem.
Exactly. They talk about divisiveness in discourse, yet both sides live on that divisiveness.
Exactly.
They don't want it to go away. They'd be out of a job.
Okay, so moving on to the actual parties in and of themselves, how many people do you think, do you think that a majority, do you think there are any, percentage-wise, of genuine moderates out there that actually aren't just kind of absolving themselves from responsibility, but an actual moderate audience out there? Do you think that it's mostly
I think the majority of people are very moderate. You see signs of it in the media. You'll see pundits on TV who will say straight out that economically they're liberal, and they're liberal on social issues and this, but on foreign policy and security, economics, they're more conservative.
In approach to their actual perspective.
Even the pundits admit they're not really partisan. They go to one side or the other simply so they can echo their voice along with everyone else on that side and make it louder. It's like a laser beam where all the waves are in phase.
But unfortunately, it would seem as though most of the people in power that are actually making these campaigns are the ones that are leftist, rightist, or whatever.
The harmony and the power of the laser beam has nothing to do with whether or not the laser is right or aimed in the right direction.
Do you think that if the correct,
it's how we decide to aim the laser that matters.
Do you think that if there were efforts put forth to broaden the communication and a harmony between these divided parties, do you think that the two are necessary, or rather, if they were taken away from right and left, do you think that their overall conservative approach and then a more progressive approach, do you think that they're necessary or
No, I think it's a distraction. I think our best decision right now is not to try to destroy them, dismantle them, or support them, or convince them to change. Just ignore them.
Okay,
people need to just start thinking for themselves and not being ashamed to vote for. This time I'm going to vote for on the Republican side. That issue I'm going to vote on the Democrat side. This one I'm going to vote for another one because they're both idiots.
That brings me to another question.
They need to think if 30% of the people out there seriously looked at every issue before, instead of just following their quote-unquote leaders, it would destroy the power of the parties.
Yeah, that leads me to another question that you mentioned, two different things. You mentioned campaign funding, and then you mentioned that as well as the encouragement of free.
The campaign funding is the key. If we could actually make that just like turn all campaigns over to a government fund, it would change everything in 10 years.
My question is, how do you see the American public? Are the reasons? Do you think it would be media, or what? How do you see the American public as at risk or susceptible to such counterproductive, damaging, dishonest campaigns or arguments or parties? And what do you think can be done to rectify it, or how? Like, do you think that we need to rid ourselves of any campaign sources, or?
That's what I'm saying. All campaign financing of a private nature should be illegal. It should be only. If I get enough signatures to qualify for the ballot on whatever, from dog catcher to mayor to governor to president, every other candidate who shares that ballot should have the exact same dollar pile to go for, and let's run with it. And then from then on, you're going to have to talk about ideas. It's not just who has the best, most polished ad campaign. It's who actually, because if the ad campaigns are more or less equal across the board, the ideas will actually be able to be heard above the hype.
So you're saying that the right that has the over-gussied up, very elaborate media spotlights that have it everywhere, they're going to have a natural advantage. So you're saying TV and media in general, unfortunately, and no crackdowns on that campaign, the money that's actually invested.
They talk about reforming it, but neither side wants to solve it, which is by eliminating it.
Okay,
the very nature of having private individuals band together to give one candidate over another an edge in the advertising of a campaign it's against the whole principle of our system.
How do you? Leads to my other question, which was, how do you regard the First Amendment rights of the people in the nation in relation to partisanship and partisan campaigns in terms of a solution? Like,
simple rule of thumb.
As far as media spotlights and whatnot.
Again, the solution isn't a blanket, rule of this must not be done. It's more of a policy. Who's talking?
Do you believe that the media?
I believe in individual freedom of speech for human beings. I do not believe that corporations or businesses have a right of free speech. They have a right of business speech, which must be always assumed to be profit-driven and to be monitored for fraud, not celebrated as a form of social change.
A lot of especially.
Whereas an individual working for a company, no matter who they are, should be free to say whatever the hell they want to anybody, anytime, except when they're on the clock.
So, there's been a lot of much ado about, especially this last election. There's been a lot of calling out. I'm sure there's been from some time now, but especially to use an example, there's been with Fox News or CNN and Rupert Murdoch and the FCC, which is actually responsible for the censoring and allocation of certain news stories being appropriate or inappropriate. Do you think that since these things tend to be, already affiliated with certain parties, do you think that there needs to be some sort of other organization in place aside from the FCC or above the FCC that in regards to media sway or media preference?
Adding bureaucratic layers rarely solves anything, and it almost always makes it worse. Though I will say, having grown up during the period when we had the balanced requirements on the airwaves, I remember as a kid, like 12, 13, 14, thinking on my own without anybody. I didn't hear people discussing it. Should we have it? Should we not?
Right.
I heard it happening. I heard shows where they bring on somebody saying this and they bring on somebody opposing it. And I remember thinking that I like this because I anticipated that this is cool because there are no Rush Limbaughs. There are no lefty-righty shock jock freaks out there who just shocking people into listening.
Right.
They're actually required discourse.
Well, one would think, during World War II...
I liked it. I make a lot of enemies with that on both sides because...
During World War II, you would have a lot of... BBC got its fame and from actually sticking around since World War II and being able to report what was going on overseas. That's how it became popular in America. However, since I believe that the American public, for whatever reason you can say is right or wrong, they can say do their schedules or just a general timing and pacing of American society. There isn't time for them, so it would seem, to do anything but watch the news, listen to the radio. And when you have large corporations such as Fox that buy up monopolies and control.
That's definitely another issue I'm concerned about. I think that we need to get back to the basic idea, which is severely limit how many different outlets any organization or individual can own.
Like Time Warner, Fox.
Anybody. I think you pick a region like, say, Southern California here. We got LA, that's like cut off San Diego, cut off maybe before Santa Barbara. San Bernardino would be included. Southern California as a social unit. Nobody, organization, or individual should be able to own more than one major newspaper, one radio station, one television outlet. That's it. That's all you get. Or equivalent of other media.
Would you see that as a corporate violation of a First Amendment right or only providing the public, these monopolies, only providing the public with basically everything you see would be the one channel?
Well, exactly. And if the corporation has a political agenda in their board, then the people in that, we used to have things like that. Where you'd have whole regions of the country where the editorial, control of the local newspapers would look at issues that are completely newsworthy, but because it didn't support their side, they would never let it be published that it even happened. You'd have whole states that didn't know things happened, other states that thought something happened that didn't, because nobody ever published the retractions.
I believe that was the premise.
Honesty must be a standard in journalism. Like, if you can prove they lied and they don't retract it as prominently as they presented it, that should be the break point for freedom of speech on media outlets.
Part of it, if it were a blatant lie, that would be part of the problem. But one would think with technology being what it is, and just the internet alone, the ability for podcasts and websites and whatnot, one would think that there would be more of an effort, at least amongst the American public. You look at places that are censored like China, you wouldn't have a lot of room for, we have the ability now to get more media sources out there to, if not to present an unbiased one, at least so many different perspectives that there wouldn't be.
If you get enough points, if you get enough spun sources on the same story, an intelligent person can unspin it pretty well. If you understand the character of the different spins. If I read Al Jazeera, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and a World Net Daily story on the same incident, mm-hmm. I know each outlet and how they are trying to get you to propagandize yourself to unspin, to have a pretty good idea what really happened.
Do you think that legal action should be taken against, not necessarily Rupert Murdoch himself, but the proprietors and owners of such large-scale media monopolies?
If they've broken existing laws on such things, then yes, they should be.
As a violation of First Amendment
They should be hit hard line, no mercy, the same way they did Ma Bell,
incidentally,
and everything else.
What I've noticed is that many of these...
It's past time for another one of those purgings, like Ma Bell, the electric, General Electric, all these companies that...
I've noticed
at one point the monopoly worked, but at a certain point it had to go. And the profit people wouldn't let go willingly.
Yeah,
Can't expect
but
them to.
Unfortunately you see that a lot of these same corporations, because of certain laws that we have in place, funding for political campaigns can be anonymously provided, although the records are kept as to where it comes from.
That's why you just eliminate the whole thing.
Do you believe that media sources should be able to provide funding for?
No funding for campaigns.
For campaigns, yes.
No, nobody, no individual, no organization, only a government source. Everybody pays the taxes into the same government pools.
And it should be a same
if I'm going for a mayor in Kentucky, I should get the same amount of money based on the population of my town as I get in Claremont, California.
Kind of like the recent California elections for governor, how some of the candidates had outrageous funding.
Right. It should be looked at, the economic level of the area and the population that you're running for representation for. That should control by a strict mathematical formula how much money you have to spend. You get to the end of the money, that's it. You're done. Yeah.
Okay, so
and that'll eliminate the most political corruption in this country would vanish if you did that, because the channels to accomplish it would have vanished.
Do you have any ideas in terms of, if media is one of the huge underlying sources in the way that it's presented, and the funding, because you have these rather large, almost enigmatic entities that are monopolies on so many different aspects that do control anything from what we see and hear on TV and in the news to how much money these different campaigns are getting and the kind of spin that the particular candidates are getting or whatever. Do you think, how do you if that is responsible for the partisanism, the most of it, the spin, the extremists, and the
well, they spin it because by making
themselves,
it, if you appeal to people's vanity, people want to be right. If you tell them they're right and everyone else is wrong, a lot of people will listen to that.
On a practical level, how do you, so if it goes back to the media, if it goes back to certain parties, or if it goes back to certain campaigns, how do you avoid partisanism for someone like you or myself, or a group of people, the American public, that do not necessarily have the funding or the means or even the information available offhand? It's not as easy to find the truth. How do you avoid partisanism and the problems of it?
It's almost impossible. That's the problem, is because the entire political system has been, privatized, so to speak, between the media and the campaign donations. It has been literally, in all but name, taken out of the hands of the public. It doesn't really work. I mean, we don't really elect anybody anymore, because nobody gets elected unless they have the right people behind them to get those votes. So the votes are, it's like television. People think that the purpose of commercial television is to create programs for you to watch. It's like, no. The purpose is to deliver your bottom stationary in a seat watching the commercials between the shows or whatever promos. Even trailers.
Or the actual evidence within the TV show of what is right,
the spin and product placement in the shows themselves.
Or what is attractive, what is considered desirable, what isn't, etc.
Getting a little feminist studies there for me.
That's the socio-political aspect of it.
Yeah, but definitely, that you're the product. When you watch television, you are the product. You're not watching the product. You're not a customer. People don't understand that. So they totally miss where the power lies.
Okay, so
politics the voter has become the product and not the owner.
Okay, so here's my last two questions. Number one would be to name 2 or 3 examples of notable figures that in the political sphere, anywhere from people that are speakers such as Rush Limbaugh or Bill Maher to actual contemporary notable sources like Obama, the actual leaders. Can you name examples of what you see as the problem with? First, I'll ask you about the leftist or liberal perspective in campaign.
Aside from the essentially, both of them have the same real problem. They just express it different ways. But like Bill Maher's a good example. Came to see him. Went to see him filming right after we got here after Katrina, when I came back home. But I like him. I like his humor. The problem is, like everybody else in the media nowadays, there's certain lines and certain policies he has to support. And I find it very difficult. I want to respect Bill Maher. I know he's intelligent. I really think that personally he is very moderate. He's just surrounded by constant drone of propaganda of people who are trying to handle him to make sure he keeps doing their job. And part of it is he is willing to compromise what he really believes on too many things, I think, to keep that job.
Aside from the whole...
same thing for Limbaugh. The same thing is he has to polarize it. He has to. Sometimes he's going to have to take positions that he doesn't really believe in, simply because if he doesn't, his listeners are going to freak out. But aside
from getting sucked into the whole partisanship,
which makes him dishonest
in let's say ratings or whatever it is that gives these people their power or their spotlight. Aside from the getting sucked into the leftist or right-wing campaigns, what do you think in and of the left, we'll start with the left, what do you think is, outside of that, the problem with their approach?
Again, the same problem as the opposite side. They're righteously convinced that they own the truth and nobody else does, and that the way to glory for mankind is to abandon everything that we know works and for in an attempt to fix the things that don't work, just basically trash the entire system as it is and trust them to replace it with something that will bring us to paradise. Both sides are doing the same thing. One bases it on God, one bases it on man.
Basically what I'm asking.
The attitude is theocratic either way. It's totalitarian, it's theocratic, it's fascist. Whether it's a hardcore moral majority, you shouldn't be able to be elected if you're not a Christian, or if it's a complete atheistic, Marxist, what was the guy? Social prosperity is not a priority. That sign we saw earlier today. Or economic prosperity is not a priority. It's like, give me a break. So,
Okay, so
it's the same mindset on either side. They just express it differently.
What do you think are the differences? I'm trying to get you to describe the difference between
the left and the right.
The relative difference in your perspective. What is the approach of the right?
It took me a long time to pull back far enough from the whole left wing, right wing, conservative, liberal crap to really see it. It really comes down to one simple thing: the freaks on the right and the freaks on the left are identical. They both.
I'm aware of the similarities. I just wanted to know what you thought were the significant differences. They
both have the same attitude. One side, the right wing, work the system. They take the traditions, the system, the things that are supposed to be. It's all right. This is we ignore the minor discrepancies and errors. Yeah, maintain the status quo because for the most part it works. Mm-hmm. And so they'll run roughshod over people with the excuse that, well, these things happen and we're right. Look, see. Stability. You don't want everything to go to hell. Protect the family. If they're threatening marriage. On the left wing, they game the system. To the left wingers, all underdogs are right. The man is always wrong. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the system must always be gamed. But if you always game the system collapses into utter chaos, right. And there is no system. So obviously, that's what a revolution is. Mm-hmm. Revolutions have never, to my knowledge, ever produced anything but chaos for a long period afterwards. The American Revolution not being that, it's a colony revolt, not a revolution of an existing system.
Like the French Revolution, for example, it basically is to rip apart the entire infrastructure and the foundation as well and rebuild. It takes many, many years.
And they very quickly ended up with total chaos and evil. The Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, I don't know of a revolution that didn't produce evil.
Sometimes it has to be necessary, even though it might involve demolishing the original.
If there is no mechanism for evolution, eventually revolution will happen. It's like you've got a boiler that you won't turn the fire off, but you won't open the safety valve.
Right.
Eventually it has to blow. It doesn't mean the blowing is a good thing.
Right.
It just means that given the situation, that's what happens. And you got to pick up the pieces. It's a lot better to note the pressure and vent it properly. So if you read The Art of War, most of it's about how to not fight. Machiavelli, the same way. Most of it's about how a total evil, self-centered leader, according to Machiavelli, would be utterly indistinguishable from a benevolent leader because that's the best way to keep the power.
Okay, so I have two questions.
So who cares what they think in their heart as long as they follow those rules?
I'll get back to that. That's an interesting, because it leads me to another question. But one question I do have is, it would seem to me as though however progressive the left may be in terms of they claim to even be willing to redefine themselves and always have ever-changing priorities, and the right seems to be conservation but in an evolved sense. But in essence, from what I can see and what you seem to claim and agree with me, that there isn't really much change in the original approach. They haven't really changed their perspective at all. They're pretty much what they were years ago, back toward even as far as the Civil War.
The different political sides, if you want to call it that, there are more expressions of human attitudes. I mean, you can find traces of the left-wingers and the right-wingers in the politics of ancient Greece or ancient Mesopotamia, I'm sure, if you get that far back. It's how certain people deal with things. We've just put different labels. The parties have swapped different positions that we would call conservative or liberal today several times over the history just of this country. The Republicans started off as the freedom and abolitionist, anti-slavery, party, the individual freedom party. It was the Democrats who were the status quo, protect the system, don't rock the boat because no matter how good the cause, because you're going to screw with people who don't deserve it. They were the protectors of the status quo. They pretended to swap for a while, but most of the time the Democrats were actually on the opposite side of the real civil rights movement. The elected Democrats, that is.
So going back to your statements, because I do have some familiarity with that, of notable works in history, books in history that have been, almost like guidelines and are almost testaments in retrospect to certain events of society. Machiavelli, The Prince, The Art of War, Book of Five Rings, and similar literature.
It's in the western side. Let's say Locke, Burke, Paine,
it seems
Jefferson,
as though, if you want to look
Franklin.
If you want to look at the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution
Jefferson
as well.
Declaration was brilliant work.
it seems as though in the Bill of Rights as well, it seems to be very much almost figured along the same lines, which is, very much self-preserving. That's the only way to get anything done. But also your
self-reinforcing.
Yeah,
I think maybe is the word you're looking for.
Self-sustaining, but you
Exactly.
to not allow any sort of enmity. Basically, to allow it to screw itself as much, utilitarian.
Exactly. That's one of the brilliance of the Constitution.
However,
is its way it's structured to self-reinforce stability and not reinforce the partisans.
Yeah, the entire thing seems to be established. I mean, I've read many of them. The entire thing, even Hitler's Mein Kampf, as controversial as that is, seems to be established around the thought of, okay, if there is a supposed enemy, basically the only way that you can really the best, most effective and efficient way is utilitarianism. The most done with the least amount of work, give them the rope to hang themselves with. However, it also stresses in all these books the danger of arrogance and to not.
I was just going to say that's a valid principle, but a lot of people use it as an excuse to run roughshod because they aren't really seeing what's realistically the whole picture, which is the human element as well.
While these texts have been relevant and they are in and of themselves, if you were a robot and something not dominated by ego, you could look at it and the individual could say that this is a very strategic guideline, very effective strategic guideline as far as, doing a lot of things. However, why is it that although these things have followed us throughout history, even into our own law system, it's sort of the same nature, why is it that it doesn't work? Why is it that it keeps sort of basically look at every leader that adhered to it?
Political science isn't a science, it's an art. It's an ongoing work.
How is it that people that write these things, I mean, Hitler, Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, even the American public, it seems they write these books. However, they're the ones that in their zealousness, I suppose, to conquer or do whatever it is they set out to do. Why is it that they don't?
They'd rather be right than patient and take what they know. I mean, Pete Townsend has a line that I've loved since I first heard it as a kid in Tommy. It says, "You've all been shown many times before. Messiahs pointed to the door. No one had the guts to leave the temple."
Right.
That's it in a nutshell. They're so busy, reassuring themselves in church. Nobody's getting out and being godly, is what it comes down to, in all human aspects. And that's spoken as a completely faithful, ordained diagnostic.
It was like that quote that sitting in church doesn't make you a Christian any more than sitting in a garage makes you a car.
Exactly. I mean, it's a corollary of it. But yeah, if you really believe in a system, you need to live it first, then tell somebody else that's the way you're supposed to live.
Okay. Can you give me one example of like a right-wing Republican, either a person or an actual relevant issue right now that, aside from the respective parties and how that is causing a problem, that just in and of itself, a quality or trait in that party that is inherently problematic?
They're boring.
Fastidious, yeah. Okay.
They promote a puritanical. I mean, America has always been schizophrenic. There's a totally anarchic, libidinous, have fun as long as it's not messing with everybody else's side, which I kind of find a little bit attractive. But then there's also a side that says you've got to keep it all under control. Problem is both sides have gone too far. Both sides think they own the body politic. Mm-hmm. And that it's a battle with the other side, and they don't realize that neither side is reasonable. You can't be a total hedonist or a Puritan and live a real life.
Can you remember a period of time that in American history where, when is the last...
You remember myself or know of?
No, know of, I'm sorry. When is the last, I'm just looking through American history, when is the last time that the actual division of the parties, even if it went back to, the original founding of the nation, where they actually function well together, where this problem between the parties did not exist?
I really don't know of any time when it really didn't exist. I mean, even after Pearl Harbor, you had people playing their games and using the situation for leverage to pursue their agenda.
Do you think the Civil War was a more genuine approach to that left-right paradigm?
The Civil War was, we blundered into it. Nobody on either side was willing to really do what had to be done to solve the problems everybody admitted were there. Everybody played la la la. It'll all work out for the best if we just kind of keep what we're doing. And eventually it all just blew up.
Yeah, however, that's usually...
The Civil War never needed to happen. I blame most of it on the South because, frankly, the attitude of the slave owner, the inherent nastiness of it is why, even in the South, most of the people were realizing, okay, this has to go eventually, but not now. Not in my generation. Not while I'm going to lose by it.
There seems to be a constantly, even in history, I mean, even in high school, we commonly taught history. The education is simply, it was the liberation of slaves. People don't often take into account the economic
hugely
problems.
Complicated.
Or just like with women's rights or whatever, the liberals being liberated that way. It's an economic crisis to follow when you suddenly have a sudden significant demographic of the American public introduced to a workforce or to a force where they have to live and are subject to equal rights.
And especially when you have forces on both in the North and the South who are completely dedicated to not allowing the implementation of that transition, because they were the ones who didn't let it be done in a sane fashion, before and then after the war. They did their best. I mean, that's how the Democratic Party really got its resurgence, was the Southern Democrats, the Ku Klux Klan. That's how they got their power, was like, hey, we've got to stop
this.
Actually
came to the division of the United States with the South declaring its own separation. Do you think that was, at least at that time, forgetting the actual issues at hand, do you think that was a time that at least the left and the right stood up for what they believed in, and it was a more honest approach to the left-right paradigm?
I will say, yeah, there was a certain amount of crossover. It became more of a North-South slavery, non-slavery thing in general than a party thing. Mm-hmm. So you had people in different parties who were, on the same side, and people in the same parties on the other side of a border were on the other side.
Do you think that
some people chose to back their state, even though they agreed with the, there were, General Lee was probably the biggest reason why the whole war lasted as long, because he was a brilliant general. He disagreed with the Southern position, but because he was a Virginian, decided that his honor lay with going with the South. And I mean, if there's a circle in hell for someone who makes that kind of choice, he belongs there.
Even then, even back as early as the Civil War, there have always been problems, and it relates to the now psychologically proven or sociologically proven fact that mentality-wise, people are pattern creatures, and they are sheep or followers, or sheep or leaders rather. They're followers and they're leaders. Do you think that, unfortunately, in a democratic country, that's the thing that sort of renders democracy null and void, or causes problems?
No, not at all. Because there's nothing to say that you can't have a sheep that's really good at pattern recognition for good or bad leaders.
So following a sheep,
you don't have to follow a bad. Yes, you don't have. Just because you're a sheep doesn't mean you can't smell out a wolf in sheep's clothing and not follow them. So I'm trying to breed a better breed of sheep.
I wholeheartedly stand behind that, and
I think if we had a better quality sheep in this country, we would do a lot better. I'm a sheep myself. We all are. Even the president's a sheep. I mean,
there was a saying that I was quite fond of, and I've adapted it to my own version of it. But you never stand upon the shoulders of giants and proclaim yourself to be ingenious. There's no such thing as ingenuity. There is progression, and I think that sort of ties into
Newton.
No, I'm not sure who. Actually, I feel bad. I don't even know who it was from.
I think it was something from that evolution
like
of science. Who somebody was lionized, and he's like, I do believe it was Newton who said, if I've seen so far, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants.
And I think that
and that's kind of what Newton did. He did synthesize as much as he did any original work. He just took what everybody knew, put it together, and said,
I think that's testament to the fact, something that hopefully you'll be able to convey to your readership in a way that they'll understand that, the true idea of being progressive is not to throw yourself, it's not to throw yourself into space and declare yourself a satellite that exists independently and that's your only space for validity. It's to literally look at what has led you here, both right and left, all over the spectrum, consider it all whether you like it or not, and then to make the next step and not disregard the past. And I believe that that's something that is very evident in your work. But
that's like a good example of a problem on the right. You've got these conservative churches who act like they had anything to do with the civil rights movement, child labor, women's votes, when their church, that the mindset of their theological ancestors at the time, were on the other side of every one of those issues, right down to slavery. They stood up in the pulpit and they defended slavery as a biblical thing. It was helpful to the... And they were the exact same mindset down the road that are now claiming that because they're Christians, they get to claim that compassion that produced the abolitionists. And that doesn't sit well with me. I mean,
as dangerous as it is,
it isn't what label your church is under that matters to me. It's What is your fruit?
Judge
them by their fruit.
Yeah, as dangerous as it is to bring up, I've noticed this because it's true of any sort of racial issue, but you see people, the whole black demographic now, where you have people that are walking around, people that are my age, of my generation, in their 20s, walking around literally, a cliche, a parody of a person. And literally walking around with their pants halfway down, like intentionally, willfully.
It's funny seeing Russians dressing like Southern California black gangsters. But
willfully being ignorant, and then the audacity, which is when you call one of them, imply any sort of there's a problem with them, they will play the race card. And it's a dangerous thing to say.
It's not just race cards. It's everybody who isn't the majority has a card nowadays.
Yeah, I know. I said
everyone has a card.
I've told people, and it's
except me. I have no cards.
It's a dangerous thing to say, and
I get no cards.
I've gotten into fixes, like little messes, dangerous situation because of it. But
that's how I learned to argue. Is I actually had to make sense.
I've told them that I don't care what you can call the race card, but I don't care what race you are. I'm pretty sure. But if you want to call the race card, I'm pretty sure that your great grandfathers, first of all, your race card is something you know nothing about. You've never been excluded in anything. You've been absolved from a lot of responsibility. Second of all, I'm sure your great grandfathers did not insist on equality, that you were worth having these rights and having to be worth respect, worth being treated as an equal, intelligent and not an animal, just so you could walk around and basically embody the very opposite of what they were fighting for. I'm pretty sure that your great
they would reject even the concept that they're anything less than the finest flower of humanity, allowable by the horrible environment that they had imposed on them.
Forgive my language, but
they mistake. They need to take a look at the list of Nobel Prize winners who were born and raised in absolute poverty and adversity, and became Nobel Prize winners, Olympic athletes.
King Jr. He did not fight for a Rosa Parks. They did not fight.
Oh, if you read the words of Martin Luther King, you find out he would not have liked the way the whole affirmative action thing went. He would not have approved at all.
The unfortunate thing is, I hate to.
They killed all the wrong ones in the 60s. Actually, they killed all the. I don't know about the right ones, but they definitely killed all the good ones.
I don't use this word. I mean, yes, of course, racial, the whole anything from slavery to the racial segregation, anything other than equality is atrocious. However, trust and respect is earned in any singular person, regardless of your demographic. And
which is why King and Malcolm X were killed, is because they learned to respect the opposition they realized that the opposition was themselves.
Yes.
And there was no enemy except the way people looked at each other. And as soon as they saw that, the people who wanted the divisiveness on their own side or the other killed
regardless
them.
Of race, of the dreaded word nigger, is someone who is ignorant and without any knowledge and has no desire to change it. Someone who is a bumbling idiot. And regardless of your race, although that word is a buzzword and I refrain from using it, I don't think it's appropriate.
Oh, it's totally become totally. I mean, when I was in high school, it wasn't quite as bad. I actually had a friend who had a button that said, "Niggers can come in all colors."
Exactly.
And in 1981, people were actually able to read that, take a moment of whoa, and then think about it and go, yeah, you're right, because it's the concept of, it's the person who sees you as one that's the problem, not the word they use to sign it.
That's like saying
nigger,
you are
kafir, barbarian. I mean, the Greeks, barbarian to the ancient Greeks meant anyone who is so disgusting that they don't speak Greek.
Heretic, low-life scum,
Well, just heretic. That's why I used heretic. Exactly. A heretic in the church is somebody who actually can reason from the data and comes to a conclusion other than the doctrine handed down as gospel. And to me, that's a good thing.
Right, but regardless of race, if you're going to walk around, I'm talking about today's in that particular demographic, it's true of every demographic. If you're going to walk around like that, you dare not play the race card, because that's you are acting against, in all ways, against the very thing that your forefathers worked so hard to earn.
To play the race card is to agree with the people who say your racial group is less than other people. It's saying you need a boost in order to compete with real people.
Their great-grandfathers died for the sake of them being able to walk around and be a representative of the fact that after all of this work, Martin Luther King died for the fact that you can walk around and be the representative of these cases made.
Well, liberal racism is a big problem. Because the whole idea in this day and age, I mean, we've got richest woman in America is Oprah Winfrey. We've got Barack Obama, who wasn't even raised African American. I mean, he has very little, usness to him as an American. Well, no, I mean, as far as he was raised in Hawaii by extremely elitist, socialist parents whose their whole idea was that the American system, starting with Jefferson, was off kilter to begin with.
As far as using words to describe a demographic, he was a very quote unquote white black person. So
exactly, he had no clue of what the black experience was, and then he was taken out of the country as a child, several years in a very foreign environment. He has very little, and we elected him president. Well, so you cannot say that America's xenophobic.
Yeah.
It's just, it doesn't fly, but we're treated as though we are, no matter what we do.
I think
and that's
what contributes to a lot of the white guilt.
That messes everybody's mind
up. And the white guilt is something that I think the liberals, possibly this is a perspective you share, you should elaborate on it, but the liberals, while most of even moderates or conservatives are motivated by little more than their own perspective until you drop white guilt or Western guilt, American guilt.
That's about it. I try to stay away from, as much as I can, any racial elements, because most of them actually are political and social, not really
Western
racial.
Guilt, American
Western guilt is definitely a thing. I mean, Western concepts versus Eastern concepts is what a lot of the problems in the world are about.
For whatever reason, I've noticed that whatever race or demographic, religion you come from, in America or even elsewhere, you are allowed to be bigoted and even insult yourself. We know the words that are used, or insult other people. However, Americans can't use, you're allowed to call a white person honky or, white person.
I have a design on one of my t-shirts that breaks down what is politically correct free speech, basically by which demographic gets, what kind of speech offending whoever is hate speech. It's like if this group offends that group, it's hate speech, but if this group says this, it's not hate speech.
But it's almost to the
point where... And it's like a formula. There really is a formula to it you can apply.
Of in some institutions or in children's places, they'll take away any sort of bright or offensive colors. They'll paint it drab. Anything that can emotionally incite anyone. They make sure that you don't even use any adjectives. It's literally to the point where we're eating oatmeal and we're avoiding literally, like you say to a police officer, what was his description? Oh, he was...
it's like 20s male
of a not white. Of
a non-white.
Non-Caucasian is now a because of all of the back and forth between African American, African black, non-black, whatever. Literally, non-Caucasian has become an option.
It's kind of like
to avoid it.
In other words, if you're not Hispanic, stay on the line.
Yeah, right. It's absurd, and I believe that's.
How's that for an example of that kind of thing? Somehow the politically correct mindset has gotten to the point where everybody in this country, no matter their ethnic background, everybody has to press a button just to kowtow to the small percentage who not only are Hispanic, but don't know enough English to function on the phone, which eliminates most of the ones who actually are legally resident or citizen.
One of these days I'll have to take you to Chinatown. And
what is the point other than... What is the point, period?
Literally street signs in Chinatown and in East LA, there will be, especially Chinatown and Koreatown, there will be signs that are actually written not underneath them in smaller characters, but on the top in large letters. The streets are written in Chinese characters where you can't read it. If you want to know the street name, you either have to look it up or you need to actually...
Okay, that I didn't know about. I gotta look into that because that's way too far.
I've gotten lost.
I'm upset because I'm starting to see billboards with Spanish only, and to me that is...
When you drive through Chinatown, Little Russia, Armenia, Little Armenia, like Glendale, you will see stuff that is literally all of it, billboards to advertisement, everything is all in that language, indecipherable to anybody else. You can't walk
which is a form of racism. It is a business saying... I mean, it's one thing if a corporation's doing it, like on one block it has English and the next block it's Spanish in a Spanish neighborhood. It's like, to me that's very borderline, but okay. I can't really argue it, even though it makes me uncomfortable. If I'm driving along or if I'm walking through a neighborhood and a storefront has nothing but a foreign language on it, no matter what the country is, if I'm in Saudi Arabia and there's a storefront that has English on it and no Arabic, that's a form of racism. The proprietors are saying, if you can't read this, we don't want your business, get out. And that is, what do they make it? Race, creed, or color. That's bottom line saying, look, if your race or your creed, ain't what we believe, don't even come in here because we don't want your business.
I've had business owners.
We don't even want you to know what we're doing.
Liquor stores in Chinatown.
So that is racism.
They don't speak any English at all whatsoever. I asked them some
questions. We need some
lawsuits.
lawsuits. We need some people filing some lawsuits against these billboards and signs for racism.
Street signs are even more questionable though because of the fact
that a city would do that. I think that's where they need to start with a lawsuit.
That's incredibly dangerous because if I'm lost, and especially since some of those neighborhoods,
English may not be the official language, but there are, as you say, common sense safety things.
This is my home of origin. I speak English. The designated language of America is English. I'm sorry.
Yeah. If it was France, it would be French, and nobody would be arguing about that. If it was Germany, it would be German.
I don't insist that anyone who lives here has to speak English. It would be preferable. But if you're going to be a business owner or it has something to do with something,
I don't think anybody should expect any special aid if they don't, unless except in very limited cases like hospitals, police, immigration process. Obviously, you're going to have to deal with somebody along the way if you're a tourist.
Yeah.
I've lived in a number of tourist areas, and most tourist area people, they welcome you from anywhere. They'll go to great lengths to communicate with you. But, if you try to mess with theirs, move in and say, no, this is the way you're supposed to do it. I mean, we call that an ugly American when we do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was in France, it was the same thing. Anywhere in Europe, they try very hard. And English, and you'd be amazed at how hard certain countries will try, because even in the non-touristy areas, they'll know enough to say hello, thank you, here, there.
As far as English goes globally, I mean, it feels like arrogance sometimes, but it's just an accident of history that we happen to have been born where English is spoken.
Well, because of
World War II, and then because of the internet. And computers, as far as I can tell, computers being the linchpin of all that, it's come to the point now, and the language of science, unless civilization collapses, I cannot anticipate how any other language could replace English as the international language like English did French. Because of World War II, English, because of us and the British, it became much more prominent for international communication.
Not to mention that we're not the only country that's...
Yeah, then we had computers and the internet, and now it's so set in stone.
I find it interesting.
I don't see how you could change if America disappeared.
Most derivative countries...
You'd still have people speaking English.
Like, for example, for English, there are derivative countries that were founded by, more or less the same demographics, so where they will speak English. You have Canada, we have America,
even without
have Britain, we have a lot of countries in the EU that are their natural speaking language. However, you don't get the same thing in Asia, like Asian places. You do not get, there's a divide between Japanese and Chinese, Cantonese and Mandarin.
There are Al-Qaeda meetings that are held in English because that's the only language that everybody understands.
That's ironic.
So that's my point. It's like it's pretty much here. It's an accident of history. It's not any benefit, though. I sometimes wonder if English, because of its bastard structure, the way it just happens with nobody monitoring the structure, is one of the reasons why, say, music, there is no Russian Led Zeppelin, there is no German Beatles, there is no, Finnish.
Recently they've tried to...
what is it about Australia, Canada, Britain, and America, and New Zealand that caused them to utterly and completely dominate the creative... Well, they don't...
South Africa's native language is Afrikaans, but it's mostly English.
I think that the authoritarianism of their system, I think, has killed a lot of the creativity of it. But what is it about the English language, which is the only thing these places have in common? And look, we have the black arts that came here. The only thing they have in common with the Beatles is they spoke English. And the only thing that's different about English is it's about the only language that nobody cared about whether you spoke it properly or not until it was fully developed.
Also, it's one of those languages, if you're not a native speaker, if you speak Spanish...
incomprehensible, a lot of the subtleties.
If you are anything, because the closest nearest language is Anglo-Saxon, but if you speak French...
Dutch is very close.
Yeah, if you speak French, if you speak any Germanic language like Dutch or German, if you speak Latin, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese... the only exception I can think is any of the Asian languages, because they're based on an entirely different system, and Russian possibly, which takes more Greek.
You'd be surprised. I'm studying Arabic right now, and I'm already starting to notice words that are from the Latin.
Yeah, but phonetically, since it's already written, there are some exceptions, but it's very phonetic, just like Germanic languages. But it's something that you can easily grasp no matter what your native language is. I mean, I don't understand the reasoning behind someone who's a Mexican immigrant not being able to even understand a basic English sentence that's not complicated. Because it sounds banyo.
I can understand that because people's circumstances, they might come here unprepared. What I can't understand are the people who were born here, have had kids here, and they don't think that it's even unusual that they can barely communicate in English at all.
I mean proprietors.
And they need to press number 2.
Yeah. What's unfortunate
to me, that's something's wrong with the system with that.
What frustrates me is for English, please press 8.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like they need it. The problem is bilingual education.
That it would automatically go to Spanish. There are a lot of phone systems now working as a customer service.
Oh, I would if I haven't encountered that. If I did, I would just stop doing business with that company. And believe me, that would be my next blog if I actually encountered something, because that's so over the top. It's not even funny.
Anyway, I will definitely have more questions with you as time goes on. But those were some of the basic ones, wanting to establish the definition to your readership of what is partisanship in your opinion. So
that's definitions is probably the most important part of what I'm here to do. Is if I can get people to make realistic definitions, I'm halfway there.
And the first question I asked, which is also important, the need to clarify, because people reflexively assume, even when you're watching TV, you want to know what's the moral of the story. You want to know when you're watching a commercial, what are they selling me? Listen to a thing, what is it for me? They need to understand it's not easy for people to reflexively understand that there is no agenda, that you are trying to basically do the pre-prep work so that issues can be brought to the table in a way that's
issues are issues. Issues are like other things. They happen.
Basically,
what matters is how you deal with them.
Yeah, if one person's speaking one language and they're not speaking it correctly to begin with, and someone's speaking another language and they're not speaking it well to begin with, and they're both trying to have a conversation, and each word has different meanings to other people, you're the person who's coming, hold on, let's find a common way.
Yeah, we've got people who are ready to shoot each other and hang each other's children.
Yeah.
And the only essential disagreement they have is they don't agree on what words mean.
Yeah, semantics. They don't know. And essentially what you said is true, that anymore, the words are useless. Yeah,
it's all facts. I mean, you can't have an opinion unless you know the facts.
Exactly.
Which makes facts far more important than opinions.
Exactly.
Which is why whenever somebody says something to me, if I'm like, whoa, I'm not sure about that, I don't say that's wrong. My first thing is, okay, what are the facts so I can look at the pattern that you're judging for myself.
Exactly.
And often I'll agree. It's like, okay, yeah, from what you see, that's it. And sometimes there's an extra fact you didn't see, utterly changes your opinion.
Yeah, when the
opinions
emphasis is
are
put on the color,
changeable. Facts are real.
Imagine if you're saying that the sky is blue, but the word blue, which is interchangeable with cerulean and periwinkle, but the only thing that mattered is blue.
Exactly. If one person demanded it to be periwinkle and the other demanded it to be, azure, yet all that mattered was the blue versus redness of it.
And they totally forgot the fact that they're talking about the sky. They don't talk about
That's what I'm saying. It's like if what matters is they're talking about the general color of the sky, not the exact shade.
And then for years to come, they would go, see, also blue and not cerulean. Also blue and not cerulean. And they don't really look at what it is that they're looking at, and that becomes lost.
Problems are there to be solved, not so you can prove that you're right.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's important to clarify to your readership that, too. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Mm-hmm.